Hey Andre, hi.
Yep. So you can, everyone can hear us clearly, right, on the session? I suppose so. Right. Perfect. Welcome to the conference, everyone. And today we're going to be speaking about nailing your APAC go-to-market strategy. So in this session, we have Lakshmi Harikumar, who's the Director of Southeast Asia Marketing at MoEngage. And she'll be speaking about how organizations need to look at adapting multiple levers, such as pricing, product, and marketing channels, while expanding to countries within APAC. So Lakshmi comes with an extensive experience in launching products in the APAC market and also scaling SaaS businesses at companies such as LinkedIn, Edgeworth, Mobstack, and MoEngage. And let me introduce myself. I'm Andre. I lead the customer success team at Survey Sparrow. So we are an omni-channel experience management platform, and I'll be hosting this chat with Lakshmi today. So Lakshmi, let's dive into this question, the first question that we have, right? So you seem to have worked with companies headquartered in North America and have actively scaled businesses in APAC. What are some of the factors that marketers need to have on top of their mind while looking at international expansion?
Sure, Andre. Before we dive into the specifics of the session, first of all, thank you so much, the SaaS Insider team. I think it's a pleasure and an honor to be part of an event that's very well orchestrated, executed like this.
Right.
Look forward to sharing more about my experience of scaling products across the APAC region. And right now, I lead marketing at MoEngage for the Southeast Asia region. And I know it's always exciting, when you are an APAC marketer, because you're not just marketing for one country, you're marketing for, a lot of countries in one go, and not many marketers get that opportunity. So really privileged to be in this position. So what I'm going to be sharing today is mostly around, my experiences of working with companies like Infosys, where I'm part of scaling up their automation product suite, at LinkedIn, where I was part of their B2B product marketing, and right now at MoEngage, where I manage all aspects of marketing for Southeast Asia. So yeah, Andre, going back to your question.
Let me come back to the question again, just to reiterate, right? So I asked you, like, you seem to have worked with companies which is headquartered in North America, and you've actually scaled businesses in APAC. What are some of the factors that marketers need to have on top of their mind while looking at international expansion?
Sure. So, yeah, Andre. See, the businesses have continuously kept changing, right? The traditional expansion model, say a few years ago, was more around, launch your product in your home ground, expand to a stage where you reach product market fit, and then you start scaling revenue, scaling your business in the home market, and then start venturing out internationally. But I think today SaaS has given us the luxury of actually expanding internationally while we are scaling within our home ground itself. And like I spoke about earlier, right, if you're a business in India, which is actively scaling into APAC countries, or if you're a business that's headquartered in North America that's actively trying to make a dent in the APAC market, it's important, to actually take a step-by-step process. Now, if you are a company that, that's crossed the product market fit stage and are actively looking at international expansion, a good rule of thumb would probably be to start when you get close to 25% of your revenue coming from international markets that are outside your home market. While that's the rule of the thumb, you could also, there are other factors which you could look at depending on, some of the inbound interest that's coming into your funnel, some of the partner outreach that's actually happening from new markets, or if you have a defined target persona, right? So that if that's a very active fit in a new market, then I think, those are very good tests that, you could start your validation exercise in a particular new market. If I should probably just talk about, a step-by-step approach to, how to approach this whole international expansion, especially within APAC countries, right? The first and foremost point is to understand that you're not just talking about one market. It's easier to club it as Asia Pacific as a region, but you're talking about countries which are which are extremely heterogeneous, right? As a market, you're talking about extensive mobile adoption in countries like South Korea and countries like Taiwan, in countries like Vietnam and Thailand. When you look at social media adoption, Thailand and Vietnam and Indonesia are far ahead. Depending on like what exactly is the business that you are in, you could look at a couple of countries, one or two specific countries which you want to venture into. I think there are some amazing frameworks that are defined earlier. Just understanding the whole market landscape from an external perspective, if you have to do so, then the PESTEL framework, the Porter's FIFO's analysis, all those come in extremely handy. At least, it helps you put all your thoughts in your validation exercise on paper and kind of, process the volumes of data that you are actually going to be generating. So once you actually cross that phase where you understand, what the political and the economic and the socio-cultural landscape within each of those markets are, then you get to the point. So we're speaking about these markets as a broad story. Like, for example, if you are a SaaS business which is looking at venturing into Indonesia as a market, right? It's important to understand these broad landscape, the laws of the land, the legal implications, and everything. And then you now start bringing your whole strategy down into how do you bring it to every single Indonesian customer that you want to target to. So that is, where the marketer's perspective comes into play, where you do a lot of activities around, doing qualitative discussions with a lot of these customers. If you are an established business in these markets, which was the case when I was with LinkedIn, right? So we were launching a new product, which was one of LinkedIn's biggest product launches in the last decade. And we actually, I was playing the GTM lead for APAC, and we really had to be very specific about which customers we start working with, so that when we go to market, we have some big names from the region which speak about the product on our behalf as well. If you are a startup that's actually venturing into a lot of these new countries, it's important that you start working with at least 10 to 15 of these initial customers. You could call them beta. But what's important is to understand all the market nuances, not just doing a broad focus group discussion or just doing a qualitative interview exercise with them. It's about just getting down to the details, understanding what are some of the business drivers for them, understanding what are some of their jobs to be done. And when you're talking about a country, you're talking about multiple verticals, you're talking about specific different levels of organizations within each of those verticals. It's important that you get down to those details as well.
Perfect, perfect. Totally understand that. I'm just looking at. So you just summarized about these frameworks that you're talking about, like the PESTEL and the Porters, right? How important are those when you're doing this expansion? Do you actually, is that your initial phase that you do a research on when you're expanding to a new country?
Yeah, so see, when you're expanding to a new country, right, there are a lot of qualitative exercises that you do. There are quantitative work that you do as well. I mean, you can run surveys, you do focus group discussions, you interview a lot of customers. If you already are working with a customer in a different geography who has active presence in this new country that you want to expand to, you then ride on top of that relationship and you say, okay, can we also work with you in this particular country? And then you have a referenceable customer or a name that you go to market directly with. What actually these frameworks and models help you do is put all these intelligence, all these understanding into a particular framework for you to process this information. So I wouldn't rely so much on the frameworks to tell me what to do, but the frameworks are basically templates where I could put in all the information that I've gathered. Ultimately, I think the intelligence of going to a new market comes from the information that we gather as marketers, as businesses, and not directly from frameworks.
Understood, understood. So once you've identified countries to expand to, how do you operationalize the expansion?
Yeah, so I mean, I've worked with companies which are headquartered in North America and try to expand actively within APAC, and also the other way around, right?
Right.
Companies headquartered in Asia and trying to venture into the North America market as well. So, I mean, I spoke about understanding the landscape of the market. If you have to drill down deeper, then you're talking about figuring out the whole product market and the messaging fit within each of these countries.
Right.
I think product market fit is spoken about a lot, but
Right.
understanding the whole market readiness for the message that you're taking to market, probably the product we're taking to market. For example, at LinkedIn, I was part of the launch of an insights product for the HR community. How important is it to define those new categories, and where exactly are they placing your product is a very important understanding that businesses need to get. And how do you straddle in that landscape, and in that spectrum is where your messaging has to play. You cannot be beyond that, where the audience or the ideal customer persona you are too advanced for them,
Right.
or if you not even on parity with competitors, local competitors in the market. So it's important to understand, where your message is fitting into the new market that you're venturing into. And I think that exercise has to be done per country. So overall, I think the market readiness fit is a huge first step when you have to start off. I think after that, then you also start looking at your organization's internal capabilities, where
Right.
Product and pricing related readiness come into play.
Right.
Um, you have a certain pricing model as a business. If there is a monthly recurring revenue model and you have a certain payment gateway that you accept payments with,
Right.
I mean, does this payment gateway even work with the new country that you're venturing into? That's number one. Number two is also to understand, are there local payment options that your customers prefer?
Right.
Are you creating an extra layer of friction by providing a very foreign, a very international payment gateway into that country?
Mm.
How easy it is for you to adapt to that market versus asking your customers to adapt for you. So I think getting your product readiness there. When I'm talking about product readiness, we're also talking about whether it requires language localization. Does your UI need changes? The use
Mhm.
of colors, especially when you're venturing into markets like China, Japan, etc.
Yes.
Just figuring out all those cultural nuances within your product pricing and your marketing activity. I think at least being aware of these is extremely important, because you've not gone into the whole activity yet, but at least doing that. I'm actually reminded of a very good example. One of the bigger campaigns that I mean, the organization was actually planning to do in China. One of the cultural nuance that we figured, especially when you're looking at APAC as a whole, right? We
Right.
tend to miss out on things that each country emphasizes on.
Uh-huh.
So China does not really appreciate black and white pictures of people with a black frame around it. That's not actually perceived as a very positive thing for them. It's actually done usually in remembrance of someone who's passed on. So, see, understanding those cultural nuances, especially when you're doing ad copy, when you're doing branding exercises in new markets, is
Mhm.
extremely important. The usage of messaging, colors, choice of words, having an inclusive language overall
Right.
around those. I think just getting that market readiness, getting that
Mhm.
product readiness right. When I speak about product, I'm speaking about both pricing and product together.
Right.
And the last thing I would probably just touch upon is also building processes around, how is your business going to run? You're not just
Right.
going as, one team. It's not just,
Mhm.
you market, you build a brand, and then you come back.
Right.
How will your partner ecosystem in the new country run? How will your pre-sales process work? How will your post-sales process work? Your sales process work?
Right.
What's going to be the revenue sharing model with partners? And some of those I think are extremely important details to chart out before even we venture into these countries. What's also important is how important is it for post sales to work in the local time zone? be aware of local languages, and culturally, do they require an extra layer of service on top of your existing product? That's also an important question to answer. I think working on a pretty detailed product beta. I mean, we used to use different words, different organizations use different words. Some call it co-creation of the product with the customers. Some call it, a private beta with customers. Some call it, a friendly association with different customers. But what's essentially important is actually building a product along with your customers so that you're able to take it to market in a much more closer knit fashion.
Perfect. Understood. So, Lakshmi, I did notice that you were saying a lot about localization, right, when you're expanding. So, it seems to be a buzzword, right? It's going local. So, how do you prioritize marketing channels when you are marketing to APAC? Taking into consideration this local aspect of it, right? I think you already touched upon it. If you could reiterate more on it, it would be nice.
Sure. I mean, I can talk about more about the work that we do here at MoEngage, right? Because we, especially the marketing that we do for Southeast Asia as a region, right, requires us understanding the lay of the land in very different countries. We work with customers in Vietnam, we work with customers in Thailand, in Indonesia, which is our biggest customer base in Southeast Asia right now, and we work with customers in Singapore and Malaysia as well. Most of these are new age companies, digital first companies. They work in a very different culture versus we also work with a lot of traditional organizations that are on their way to going digital, which is also a very important part of our customer base right now.
Right.
How do we make sure that our marketing activities resonate with all these countries, all these customer persona that we spoke about, and then if you have to segment them further, you could talk about a retail customer in Indonesia wants to know more about how another retailer in Indonesia is using MoEngage.
Okay.
So the ultimate question that is in front of a marketer is always about how your marketing has to work at scale, but how do you customize and segment and use data so much that your messaging and your marketing feels like you're talking to one person at a time.
Right.
So in the back end, you're obviously scaling a lot of work. But I mean, you're talking to say 300 to 500 people through one particular event. But how do you make sure that the person who's listening to it feels like I'm talking to them directly? I think that's the big challenge that marketers try to solve always. In homogeneous markets, it's slightly easier to generalize and say, okay, this messaging works for this persona. But I think in heterogeneous markets like APAC, it's important to segment, slice and dice data that you have further and further, so that you are talking to a finite number of people, and then you're making sure that message resonates with them.
Understood.
Before they look at you as as an outsider who does not understand the particular market.
Perfect. Lakshmi, I think we would be wrapping up the session. We'll take some questions, but thank you so much for your insights. But would you like to say some last words before we go ahead to the Q&A session?
Sure. So one of the questions that I usually get, from like generally when I'm having conversations with marketers, is about the usage of channels also. That's something I wanted to touch upon today. I think I did not mention about it. So when we're talking about markets, countries in Asia, right, we're talking about very indigenous marketing channels. We are speaking about, say, Zalo in Vietnam, tools like Line in Thailand and Japan. We're talking about very specific social networking platforms in South Korea. And then obviously we have our WhatsApp and Facebook and LinkedIn and whatnot. So the channels are abundant. I think the question that everyone needs to answer when you're taking a message across to the market is, how are you using that particular channel? Are you just using all channels for all your activities? Maybe you need to just look at specific channels for just promoting your activities, and probably communication channels more like WhatsApp and Zalo could be used more to establish conversations with your prospects instead of bombarding everyone with messages across all channels. I think that's something and that's tailor-made for every organization. There's no specific playbook that anyone uses. So I think it's important to just use data to get that aspect right.
Right. Perfect. Thank you so much, Lakshmi. So I'll just open up for questions. So if you have any questions, please type on the chat box beside your screen. So does anyone have any questions? Let me have a look at that.
I would also love to know if anything that has worked for any of you that you've tried in APAC markets. I'm happy to just listen in and also look at other ideas.
Right. I don't think we have any questions coming up. Let me have a look at that. So the audio is echoing a bit. All right. Okay. So we don't have a lot of questions coming up, Lakshmi, but I think we are going to be wrapping up the session. We have 2 minutes. So, but looks like okay. It seems looks like Andre has covered everything. It seems. All right. Perfect. So yeah, we will be wrapping up the session, but before we go, right, let's just touch upon this topic about how in MoEngage, right? How is the marketing and sales working together, right? So are you helping the sales team a lot in terms of bringing in customers? I know that you'll be helping with them, bringing in leads, warm leads to them, but is there anything else that you do?
Yes, of course. That alignment, I think, is a priority. So we're not working as a marketing team, as a sales team, or
Right.
as a customer success team. So I think when you're talking about going to new markets, we're talking about one GTM team, and
Right.
it works that way. Yeah, from a sales and marketing alignment, I could probably talk about a couple of things. One is any marketing team, right? They would have a wide net marketing activity where they're building a brand, they're trying to create demand, which obviously converts to results through your website, through some of your other channels. But what's also so that's a steady state, sustainable, long-term activity that you're building when you're getting into different markets.
Right.
How do you, for example, even basic work like, how do you localize some of your marketing activities in local languages? When you're doing a webinar, how do you do it in, say, an Indonesian Bahasa, for example, for that particular audience? So I think going and starting off with some of those basic discipline, if I may say so, in some of your wide net marketing activities is important. On the other hand, what's also important is to actually have a very targeted approach, especially in these countries when you need an account-based marketing approach to look at how do you target specific names, which are must-have names in your for your business. How do you go about targeting some of them, having conversations with some of those, and when you're talking about big organizations, right, like banks going through digital transformation, when you're talking about traditional retailers and all those, it's important to map more people, multi-thread different audience, have the right kind of conversation, and that is where I think marketing and sales works a lot more closely together.
Perfect. I think that's about it. We are going to wrap up the session. Thank you so much, Lakshmi, for coming in, and it was truly insightful discussion that we had. And we are looking forward to seeing you again. And also for those people who are attending, you enjoy the rest of the conference. And thank you so much.
I think there's one question around pricing in the Q&A box. I can probably just quickly answer those, Nikhil, and happy to answer these offline as well. So when you're speaking about pricing changes, right, it's also important to understand what are you trying to solve for in that particular market. So one of the examples I could think of is at LinkedIn, I was managing the B2B product marketing for the hiring related product suite, right? So one thing that we actually did was to geofence the whole product feature, because a lot of Indian companies were hiring mostly within India. They did not need they did not have a massive need for hiring outside the country. They were mostly looking for candidates within the country. So what we did was we actually geo-restricted the candidates that they could access. They were with an India LinkedIn Recruiter product, they could only look at candidates within India. And that product was actually priced at a lower price because obviously the volume of sales is going to make up for the reduction in price there. I think some of those aspects need to come into play when you're talking about emerging countries where the volumes are going to be large, and the ask is going. Also, the price sensitivity is very high when it comes to competition. I hope that answered, Nikhil. If not, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Happy to answer this.
Perfect. Lakshmi, few last words for the end of the session. Let's just wrap it up for the session, right?
Sure. Thank you so much, Andre, and Gautam and Chameli. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much, Lakshmi. And all the audiences, you have a wonderful sessions ahead. You enjoy the conference, and bye-bye.